May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Amen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have always loved Advent. It precedes Christmas, and who doesn't love Christmas? Except maybe the Grinch or Ebenezer Scrooge. Anticipating the arrival of any baby is exciting. And to me, the lighting of the Advent candles, the stillness that it brings, helps to provide balance to all of that excitement. And the 4 Advent candles symbolize hope, peace, joy, and love. The first candle, hope, is also known as the prophecy candle, which is timely as I am a deacon intern giving my first sermon here. And deacons are meant to preach about the needs of the world. So as I was preparing for this sermon, I used a deacon's prayer in which I asked God to shine God's light through this sermon. And I also asked God to lead my mind and my thoughts to where God wanted them to go. And as I did that, I got a strong sense that God wanted me to tell you today, God will show the way. If you remember nothing else from what I say this morning, remember that. God will show the way. In today's gospel reading, Mark uses a prophetic voice by reminding us that Christ will return one day, and therefore we need to keep alert and do God's work. So, what work have you done for God today? And what work will you do for God during the Advent season? Last weekend, Netflix began airing a film called Rustin, which is about the civil rights leader Bayard Rustin, who organized the 1963 March on Washington. It is a compelling film through which many beams of God's light flow. Bayard faced a rocky and uphill and steep climb just to solicit some support for the March on Washington. And he got opposition from the segregationists, which you would expect, but he also encountered pushback from the President Kennedy's administration, from the US Congress, including African-American members of the Congress, and the NAACP. But using a prophetic voice, he spoke in powerful rhetoric and challenged these institutions to do what was just and right. He also experienced challenges because he was a Quaker and steeped in the principles of nonviolence. And if that wasn't enough, he was also an openly gay man living in the 1960s. He was a brave soul. Thankfully, he had support and encouragement from a lot of strong women. And in that time period, they were mainly behind the scenes. Eventually, the NAACP permitted him to move forward with the march, and he was given the title of deputy director underneath someone else. And he told them, you can give me the title of trash collector. It doesn't matter to me. I really want to move forward with this march. God showed Bayard the way. So I'm going to share with you a few scenes from the movie, through which I think the gospel of today shines. So in the first scene, as I said, women tended to be behind the scenes in this period. But there was one notable exception in the March on Washington, and her name was Mahalia Jackson. She was a prominent contralto gospel singer, and there are a few clips of her singing in the movie. She sang a song called How I Got Over, which is about God supporting us through hard times. And as I'm watching her sing, I'm struck by her delivery. And I've seen many gospel solos before, but this time it occurred to me that she was preaching. Her cadence, her timing, of course, the words, the delivery, she was preaching that morning. She wasn't behind the scenes. She was front and center before Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. God showed Mahalia the way. I also read, it wasn't part of this movie, but that Mahalia, as Dr. King started to speak, said to him, tell them about your dream, Martin, tell them about your dream. And he departed from his 4 pages of prepared remarks and gave his I Have a Dream speech, which we all know is one of the most famous and influential speeches in the 20th century. The second scene I want to tell you about is between Bayard and a woman named Dr. Anna Hedgeman. And it's at the end of the march, people are leaving, and she comes to him and she says, when I was a young girl, Bayard, my father used to say to me daily at the end of the day, Anna, what useful thing have you done today? And she motions across the mall and she says to him, gives him a hug, and pretty much suggests to him that they had done something very significant that day. Now, most of us are not going to organize a march on Washington, but we can encourage each other to be alert and do God's work. And God will show us the way. And the final scene I want to tell you about is, again, at the end of the movie, NAACP leadership came to Bayard and said that President Kennedy had invited them to the White House for a meeting. And the person playing the John Lewis character, he's young at that point, says, Bayard, we think you should be with us. And Bayard says, you know, early on, I told you all, I would be happy to be a trash collector if we can pull this off. To which one of the leaders said, oh, Bayard, you're much more valuable to us than a trash collector. To which he replied, oh no, trash collectors are just as valuable as any of us. And he proceeded to get a bag and a trash grabber and pick up the trash along the mall. Speaking of trash collectors, a few weeks ago, a group of parishioners from St. Nicholas went down to Germantown Road and picked up trash off the road. And I joined you for a little bit. I didn't notice any titles that morning other than trash collectors. And I was happy to be a trash collector too. So this Advent, I encourage you to stay the course. Keep on keeping on is how my mother would put it. Do God's work. Keep alert. And remember that our obligation does not end at the end of church service or at the end of Advent. It continues every day as we welcome Christ into our hearts and into the world. Amen.